Okay, well, welcome everyone to Wholesale Investors Health, Med and Tech panel session this afternoon. We have around 30 minutes and I have been joined by 4 very experienced life science executives. I'm going to ask each of them one initial question, and then as we move through the panel session, I have a couple of questions for each of them individually. So firstly, my name is Glenn Cross. I've spent most of my working life in the life sciences sector. I've worked for startups and multinationals, and my last 13 years of full-time work, I was the COO and then the CEO of Biotech, which is Australia's life science organisation with some 3,500 members. And currently I have my own investment and advisory company, and I sit on a number of boards of Medtech and Biotech companies, and I'm involved with two venture funds. So I'm really looking forward to the session this afternoon. So firstly, can I please introduce H.H. Tong? If you could tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, thanks very much, Glenn, and thanks for having me on this session. My name is H.H. I think trying to pronounce my Chinese name is going to be a little bit difficult and challenging. I head venture investing for SGInnovate. SGInnovate is an early stage deep tech investor, wholly backed by the Singapore government. And areas of our investment focus are things that are definitely critical to the world. Healthcare and medical is definitely one of our core areas of focus, and we have made about 30 investments over the last 3 years in that particular sector. So I'm really looking forward to speaking a little bit more about our portfolio, what they do, as well as learning from everyone on this panel about life science. Thanks.
Great, thanks, HH. Our second panelist, who I know quite well, is Leslie Chong, and she's the MD and CEO of Imugene. Leslie.
Thank you. Thanks for allowing me to come on this panel. I think it's going to be quite interesting. So I am the CEO and Managing Director of a company called Imugene. We're squarely in the immuno-oncology space, meaning we really enact your immunity to fight against the particular kind of cancers. We have 2 platforms and about 4 programs. So I'm quite busy at the moment. And so I'm excited to talk about how COVID has affected or not affected us and how we're moving along.
Thanks, Leslie. Our next panelist is Joseph Mokanu, who is the managing partner at Verge Healthtech Fund.
Thanks, Glenn, and thanks everyone for having me here and for the opportunity. So I'm Joseph Mokanu. I started a seed stage health tech venture fund called Verge. And we invest globally, but at the very early stage, in companies that use technology to expand access, quality, and efficiency to healthcare, especially targeted towards emerging markets and within that emerging Asia. Started out as an angel investor and realized that, really wanted to do this full time, as some of our early angel investments were doing really well. And between our angel and fund, we've now invested in 18 health tech companies, all at the seed stage.
Thanks, Joseph. And our final panelist is Damian Slizzers, Managing Director at Kobold Ventures. Damian.
Thanks, Glenn. I'm a patent attorney by training. I've been a patent attorney for 20 years, and I think my questions are going to reflect that. I've also been managing a portfolio of early stage life sciences companies for our family company for a number of years. And now we're looking to raise capital for Kobold Ventures to invest in early stage life sciences companies.
Thanks, Damian. Well, the first question that I'll get each of the panelists to address is obviously front of mind with all of us at the moment in these very unusual and challenging times. And that's basically, what's your outlook for the rest of this year and 2021 in terms of the impact COVID-19 has had on so many aspects of our life? And are you seeing any particular trends or issues emerging? So again, I'll just work down with the list. Would you like to take that first, ATAC?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Glenn. Our area of focus has always been deep tech. And ironically, and I'm not saying this in a facetious manner, but COVID-19 has actually helped to compress certain time to market for a lot of our companies. It has represented, unfortunately or fortunately, an opportunity for some of these medtech companies in our portfolio to actually get to market much faster than they would have if they had followed the traditional route of going through the clinical trials and the long regulatory process to market. So I think for a lot of our medtech companies that have expanded their portfolio to cater for some of the different aspects of testing or analysis of COVID-19, they're going to do extremely well. They are already doing very well, and they've had no problems raising funds. Some of our other sectors that we focus on, like mobility, have actually also seen tremendous traction, especially in autonomous delivery. Our companies in our portfolio, like Starship, have actually hit their annual projections for the next 2 years just in the first 3 months. So I think from a portfolio perspective, we are very satisfied with the performance. Of course, this is not something that we would wish on anyone. I don't think that it is something that we are happy about. But I think that from an investment perspective, there are definitely opportunities there.
Thanks, HH. I'll get back to you on one of those comments you made in the next round of questions, because I'm interested in particular the investment the investment environment. Same question to you, Leslie. You being more on the pharmaceutical and drug development side.
That's right. So most of my time is spent largely in the air. My mom says, Leslie lives in the air, because I'm usually out of the country for 6 months out of the year. And what COVID has done, in largely in a positive way, has grounded me in that, for lack of a better word, it's helped me organize, and it's also helped me really focus across all my programs. So now my development path is very clear. I'm quite focused. I'm very lean with my team about exactly what we need to do, such that when COVID allows us to open up across the travels or go into the medical center, we know exactly what to do. So it's made our vision much more clear, because I'm here on the ground and is able to be available for my team.
Excellent. Joseph, where are you based?
I'm based in Singapore.
Okay, so HH and yourself are both based in Singapore.
Yeah, we know each other from before.
Excellent. I Googled your website. I didn't know a lot but I couldn't really tell where you were based. So what about your thoughts on the impact of COVID-19 on the sector?
I think the key word is relevance. Are you relevant to COVID? Are you relevant to the new normal that's coming after this? And luckily for us, I mean, similar to HH and Leslie, we have been, I hate to say the word benefit, but basically the changes that we've been waiting for in digitization and decentralization of healthcare that we've been waiting for 20 years, basically, have been forced to happen now. And our portfolio is designed for this new normal, and coincidentally. And 7 of our 9 fund companies within our fund are relevant to COVID, and 3 are actually helping today. That being said, if you are not relevant to COVID or the situation going forward, it's going to be very difficult. And even within healthcare and life sciences, if you're in the middle of clinical trials and you had budgeted for this clinical trial development to take place this year and next, it's going to be really tough, because trials are paused. And if you're doing something that is wholly dependent on the outcome of that trial, that's very, very difficult. If you're lucky to have completed it partially, then you can do some interim analysis, double down on the science, and really try to get as much out of that data with all this extra time that you have. But if you're not, then it's really, really difficult, and let alone any other sector that's been impacted. I think on a macro scale, it's hurting, and it's going to be difficult for the foreseeable future.
Thanks, Joseph. And Damian, are you based in Australia?
I am. I'm based in Melbourne.
Oh, excellent. What about your thoughts on COVID-19 and the impact?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the most interesting trends that I've seen in the last 4 or 5 years is, I mean, we're in the therapeutic space, and that's where we invest. And it's a very risky area. It takes long a long time to get to a stage and a lot of capital to get to an exit and to seeing revenue. But there's some companies now that are generating revenue at an earlier stage by various means, and they're of interest to us because there's a bit of sustainability there to the model. A couple of those, Planet Innovation is a very well-known company that is not only a service business, but is also using that expertise in incubating essentially small companies that they see some upside to. And another company that's very similar to that is Synthesis Pharma in the drug discovery area. And I think those companies at least give you some fallback in terms of sustainability as opposed to that traditional early stage pharma model.
Yeah, and I'd agree with all of the comments. Certainly, what COVID-19 has done is made so many more people realise that in the end, it's your health that counts. We've seen countries nearly destroy economies to preserve the health of their people and their populations. And I think personally that we're going to see an increased emphasis on healthcare in the broad sense, and more specifically life sciences, medtech and pharmaceutical development as we move forward. So I think for those of us in this sector, if anything has come out of this pandemic, it has been that we'll see hopefully an increased focus on our sector and our technologies. The only concern I have still is whether the politicians get it. I spent 13 years talking to politicians primarily in Australia, and so many of them here in Australia haven't got it. I think it's a bit different in Singapore. I've spent a bit of time up in Singapore, a little bit different in the US as well. Anyway, they're my thoughts. So I personally am excited about the future for our sector. So just going on to individual questions, again, I'll just work down through our list. HH, I was interested in your comment about investment not being and capital money's not being a real problem as you see it. What areas of focus is there in terms of technology and regions for your company?
Yeah, thanks, Glenn. And I think it has been alluded to by Joseph and Damian as well as Leslie on what are the areas that money is actually flowing towards. Definitely, like what you said, medtech, healthcare is one sector that does not seem to be lacking in LP interest, in VC interest, PE interest, investor interest in general. We will maintain the focus on that particular sector. Obviously, we will continue with other aspects of digitization, mobility, quantum technology, because we have got to look a little bit further ahead of the curve. Our areas of focus, or I would probably say, we have got a global mandate to invest all over the world, because we view deep tech as being a global ecosystem and not just confined to any one country. We have investments in the US, Europe, India, and the only reason why we don't have investments in other parts of the world is not because we have excluded them from the scan, but we have sort of never been able to get the right price or the right stage of company in some of these other areas. But we're constantly looking for opportunities. Some of our companies have moved to Australia. They've raised funds from the likes of Blackbird Ventures, some very reputable investors in Australia. And we are also looking to work with Cyro to see if there are any opportunities coming out of what they are doing in your part of the world. So I think we are not excluding any region from our scan.
Okay, thank you. And Leslie, we touched a little bit, Joseph mentioned some of the issues that we've had around clinical trials during this difficult time with lack of travel and mobility of people. How have you seen the last 6 months impacting in terms of what Imugene's doing, and also in terms of markets and capital raising?
So obviously, I think there has been quite a lot of impact on pharmaceutical and biotech companies squarely in the medical site, because a lot of those medical centers were foregoing cancer patients to make room for the COVID patients, which is the right thing to do. And just import and exports of products. So in our company, we have B-cell immunotherapies, which is a vaccine, a cancer vaccine. And we also have an oncolytic viral therapy. So you say the word virus, and it's just very interesting what happens there, because it's so many different levels of assurances and accreditation before you can get a drug into a certain company. And we're squarely in the US, and also now, because of COVID and what's happening in the US, unfortunately, we are moving a lot of our operations into Australia, which is great for the Australian economy, and also for Australians to take sort of center stage in the biotech market, which, you know, we were just coming up, and you can tell by my accent, I'm from the US, originally from Genentech, which is possibly one of the largest biotech companies. I really wanted to bring that spirit and culture here. And so in light of COVID, we are being able to do that. So I'm quite excited in that respect, not because the virus is obviously reaping havoc on financial as well as other commerce and businesses. But I understand that in terms of marketing and investments, those are still ongoing. People are able to make important and very large deals via Zoom and other facilitating projects and platforms. So I think business is changing, but it might be changing for the better. So we're sparing the time that it takes us to travel to places, and we're being much more focused and lean about how we do business. So I think this change is a positive thing for our industry.
It's certainly a different scenario, isn't it? I was talking to a stockbroking firm here in Melbourne about a week ago, and they were raising some money for one of the listed biotech companies in Australia, and they said they raised 20 million in 7 days via Zoom.
Yeah,
so
it's amazing.
We've never seen something like that happen before, to be a roadshow over a couple of weeks going around to all the capital cities in Australia. And so, yeah, we're amazing humans. We can adapt, can't we?
The adaptability, the creativity, and being resourceful is what humans are all about. So I think we're utilizing that to the fullest.
Thanks, Leslie. Joseph, I was really interested when I went on your website and looked at what your company's doing. There's not many investors down at seed stage. Tell us about why you chose to invest at that level, and a little bit about sort of the companies and opportunities you invest in.
Yeah, sure, happy to. It's kind of funny that you highlighted that there's not many investors in this space, and that's exactly why we're here. You know, we have a tremendously broadened amount of opportunities because of the paucity of investors here. And if you look at the global figures, about 3/4 of all health tech deals are Series A or later versus 40% across other industries. And so the question I had and I observed is, you know, how many good innovations die simply because they can't find the right investor? And you might be lucky in Silicon Valley or in London or somewhere else where you have a great amount of seed stage investors, but for the rest of the world, sadly, this is not the case. And, you know, it is difficult. The companies will take longer to develop. There are many more things that can go wrong. So we try to really, you know, like HH, we have a global mandate. So we do believe that the greatest innovations don't necessarily exist where the greatest needs are. So we basically look for solutions to really big and serious problems. And that's one really nice way that you can filter down the list significantly. If you're targeting one of the great non-communicable diseases or a massive point of inefficiency that is systemic across most health systems, if you're radically expanding the affordability of something, you know, cutting down costs by 10x, then that's really interesting, and that de-risks from a solution perspective quite greatly. But the most important thing in a seed stage startup is the team.
Yes.
You have to be doing it for the right reason. Startups are really hard. Healthcare startups are even harder. And it's going to be a decade of pain, likely, before you see any sort of light at the end of the tunnel. So you really have to, you know, do this for the right reason. But you also really need to have the right skill sets and team around you. So clinical, business, technical expertise and experience is paramount. And because you've got the whole globe to choose from, you can find complete teams, or teams that are one step away from being complete. And then the last thing that we really do look for is, you know, are you really defendable? You know, do you have an edge? Is it proprietary IP? Is it a business model? Is it networks that you have? Is it data that you have that no one else has? And if those criteria are satisfied, and that's a pretty long list, and that funnels things down significantly, then, you know, we'll make an investment. And just as a bit of an idea of what the funnel is, we looked at over 2,000 companies in the past 2 years. Looked at about—
How many have you invested in out of the 2,000?
9.
9. Okay, that's it. Yeah, that's about a standard rate. 3 or 4 per thousand is what I've seen before. Mm.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Damian, you're starting a new fund, I gather, and having been a patent attorney for a number of years, I think we probably know the answer to the question, but I'm interested in your other observations. Just how important is patents and the patent process in life science companies?
Well, it's obviously critical, Glenn. It's one of the few ways you can protect your investment in that area. So having said that, I've seen a few examples where people have you know, tried to exploit other aspects of their technology to give them other forms of protection as well. And probably one of the more interesting ones of those is Telix Pharmaceuticals that works in the radioisotope space. And there the supply chain is a very critical aspect of the protection as well, and sort of cornering that supply chain gives them an edge, and to some extent a proprietary edge. So I guess the other point that I was going to make is that it's increasingly difficult to get broad claims in life sciences nowadays. They tend to be very narrow once you go through the process, and that's much more difficult than it was 5 or 10 years ago.
So if you can't get a patent, what's the best option to try and protect your technology?
Well, if it's too late and you're with that technology, regulatory exclusivity. So there's a few, every country, if you get a registered product, you get at least 5 years of protection. No one else can sell that product within that 5-year period. There's other aspects of that help you as well.
Excellent. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes left by my reckoning. I'm going to go off the agenda here a bit in terms of the questions that Wholesale Investor had drafted for us to talk about. I'm really interested, you know, for those of us, and I gather now that I've met all of you, have been in the sector for some time. North America, and particularly the US, has been the centre of biotech and life sciences. Obviously, especially the Asian region has had more prominence in recent times, and Europe is still is a big market. But based on what's happening in the US at the moment, do you see a shift at all globally? I'm very interested in the global environment. So do you see a shift globally away from North America, perhaps? And how do you think the many issues that they have there are going to impact? I'll ask Leslie that question first. What do you think, Leslie?
Well, I was really hoping that Melbourne, Victoria, would have behaved so that Australia could have opened up in full, because I think this we could have gone full on with resurrecting business back up in full and draw the attention of not only students, but businesses. So I've already made the shift from my US sites basically to start up the Australian site as a backup. But I think we're really focused now on Australia because we simply don't know when US will be operating in full. We obviously have good relationship with some of the centers and hospital sites in the US. However, the infrastructure needs to be there before we'll fully engage. And I think Australia, this is a great opportunity for Australia to really rise above in the medical sector.
Thanks, Leslie. The question to both HH and Joseph, and perhaps you could also throw in your thoughts on the Asian region and in particular China. Again, where we're seeing a shift in dynamics there from a global geopolitical perspective. So, HH, your thoughts first.
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and it's something that preoccupies us all, both as investors as well as SGInnovate being part of the government apparatus. I think it is abundantly clear that governments have realized that there's a necessity to have certain manufacturing, certain distribution capabilities in country rather than being able to outsource it to the most efficient place. We found that to our detriment when we realized that we did not have the mechanisms or the infrastructure to actually build something as simple as to manufacture something as simple as face masks, and had to actually set up an entire production line within less than a month in Singapore. So certain things at the almost at the medical device level, the most basic levels, a lot of countries are going to start to bring that in-house. China, obviously, based on conversations I've had with friends and the ecosystem over there, is that the government is extremely preoccupied about how this polarization of the world is going to take place. And while they've always had a strong push towards building a very strong medical biopharma industry in China, it is actually taken. There's been a much stronger push to ensure that they build their own titans of pharma in their country. So I think every country is going to start to relook at their own national prerogatives in this particular space.
Thank you. Joseph?
I think HH was quite articulate in outlining some of the concerns that we do see here. I do want to remind that Rome wasn't built in a day, and that we as humans tend to overestimate the amount of short-term change and underestimate the amount of long-term change. And it is clear that the poles are shifting. To the extent of that pole shifting, I'm personally not sure. I still think that a lot of the leading R&D does happen in North America. The top schools are still, unfortunately, in North America. And there is a short-term opportunity, as Leslie rightfully identified, to shift clinical trial activities outside of the US. And our own portfolio is looking at sites in Taiwan, Singapore, Korea, and well, even north of the border in Canada, to see whether there might be a way to accelerate things forward. And we'd love to also understand what is available in Australia. But the fact of the matter is that the Stanfords, the MITs, they're still in the US.
They'll still be there, won't they?
Yeah.
Thanks, Joseph. Damian, your thoughts?
Oh, I mean, there's a few aspects there. I think one of the things that I'm hearing in Melbourne is that China is becoming an increasingly attractive place for investment in terms of getting investment into Australia. Subject to all the political difficulties we might have, but it's less attractive as a market. It's a difficult market to enter. So in that sense, that's my comments on China. I don't know much about it, and certainly not as much as people in Singapore. But in terms of the US, I agree. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. I think it's still a very, very strong country, and particularly in this space.
Thank you. We've got a couple of minutes left, so I thought I'd just ask again. I'll go down through the panel list. just a question on your general thoughts on the next 2 or 3 years. Are you optimistic? Are you less than optimistic? Are you excited? And any other final comments you'd like to make, starting with you, HH.
Yeah, thanks. Actually, I'm slightly pessimistic with regards to the global economy in the next couple of years at least. I don't think that we're going to get out of this COVID-19 slump for some time, and that's even given the assumption that mass testing and a vaccine is going to be found within the next 18 months, which personally I doubt, but I may be wrong in that because I'm not that close to the market. Thank
you, Leslie. Also, Leslie, what are your thoughts on a vaccine, do you think?
Well, I'm quite close to it, as you can imagine.
Yeah, I know.
I have a lot of friends in the industry that's vastly working on candidates, and I used to work for some of those companies that are trying to generate a candidate. I think we've got a while. And then also upscaling, that manufacturing aspect of that's going to be huge. You not only have to develop a product, but you're going to have to make bulks for the whole entire world in a matter of within a year. That's just, it's a huge feat. So I will add on to what HH just said, but I'm a little bit optimistic, and I think I'm just optimistic in my bones. I think we've got great things ahead of us. I think we're learning and doing things differently. I think the economy will heal. As for my company, we've got 2 different products that are just about to go into cancer patients, and that's where the rubber hits the road, and to see how it acts in the human body is so exciting to me, and I think we can finally prove what we saw preclinically. So that's what keeps me going, that we're going to get this into humans and possibly have a cancer therapy that works really well in combination or alone with ease of manufacturing. So for me and my company, I'm quite positive about it. And personally, I'm a pretty positive person. I live in Australia. The weather is gorgeous, and we're looking like it's going well. Melbourne will soon behave, and we'll open up the whole country. And I think it's going to be not business as usual, but maybe better business moving forward.
Thanks, Leslie. Joseph?
I'm both pessimistic and optimistic, if that makes any sense. COVID was a catalyst for a lot of underlying social, economic, geopolitical challenges that are not going to be fixed overnight. At the same time, it's also given us an opportunity to pause and reflect and think about how we can start to address this. From an investing point of view, I think that focus is going to become more important than anything. And yeah, we'll see where it all goes.
Thank you. And your final thoughts, Damian?
Well, I'm pessimistic about the global economy. I don't think it's going to do very well over the next few years. But I'm optimistic in terms of the incentive for innovation. I think it's a world where we just need to innovate to keep things moving, and that's the space we're in. So yeah, I'm quite optimistic on that front.
Thank you. Well, I've moderated many panels, especially in my previous role at Biotech, and this has been an excellent panel. I really appreciated working with you for this brief 30 or 40 minutes. We could have probably spent a lot more time on some of the key issues, but thank you again for helping us out with this panel today. Thank you.
Thanks,
Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn.
So much
Thanks,
fun.
everyone.
Thanks, guys.